You know, it's a difficult thing to shake off the impact of the world. We just are so saturated with it. I think about the children of Israel during that time after the period of the judges, when they had seen kingdoms around that had kings leading them, and they wanted that. And God was disappointed because he wanted to be their king, but they wanted a king like the nations around them, especially in our country. We're very concerned about things that are going on, and we all know when you check out at the grocery store, the key things are there. And what are they? The royals. What's Prince Andrew going to do? And the sleaze, like, will Miranda get back with Blake? Yeah. And there's the fascination with the mammon, the luxuries, the beauties, the bodies, the boats, the diets, the obsessions with new supplements, and things like that. That's what's going to be there because that's the biggest sellers. That's what people are really interested in. Have you heard about the vagal tone yet? And this is when you get with a group of people and you got to get a certain hertz and a certain decibel and you go, and this is supposed to calm your vagal system. And you're going to lose weight and you're going to get wiser, and it's really going to help to calm you down. It's just amazing what people are involved in. But do you see that it's 100% fleshly? It has to do with this life. It has to do with the here and now. That's why when you say discipline, people immediately think body mass index, body fat, tone, and shape. Well, I want you to know I've learned to be more impressed with emotional and spiritual discipline. I told my wife, I said, I don't know about these folks in Oklahoma. I've got a heritage up there, but I think they've lost their mind. She said, what do you mean? I said, they want me to speak on self-discipline. I'm the fattest guy on the lineup, but we're going to see there's more to it than that. And by the way, if you had seen me last year, you wouldn't see me like you do now, because I've gained a tremendous amount of weight. I had a knee replaced, and for several months, I couldn't do anything. I used to walk a mile a day, and so I've gained a lot of weight, and I got to get disciplined to get back on that. This week is my 6th month, so I'm doing a lot better. I'll be able to walk again. I'm excited about it. As a male, I'm really interested in physical strength. I love those stories about David killing a lion and a bear with his bare hands. Man, there was a guy one time in Tanganyika named Heath, and he shot a lion, and the lion charged and pinned him down. And several of the gun bearers jumped on top of that lion and stabbed him to death with spears and knives after he had been shot by this high-powered rifle. That's amazing to think that David did that with his bare hands, and he did it as a young man. He also killed a bear. There was an Eskimo named Alexei Pitka, and he was paddling around in a river, and he saw this gravel spit, and there was a big bear on there, and he wanted that bear. So he shot the bear, and the bear collapsed after a while. Very carefully, he beached the canoe, walked up, touched the bear with the barrel of his gun, and the bear roared up, and in a flash of fury, tore him up so bad that it took 6 months in the hospital to rebuild his face. But David killed a bear barehanded. Now that's pretty impressive to me. I like his mighty men. Have you ever studied about the mighty men of David? They were some hosses, and I like to hear about Samson and the things he did. Now the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. Don't defile it. And I'm not going to be here today to put down on anything or anybody, and listen carefully to what I have to say. Because one of my best friends, Ken Stegall, said, you need to be careful that you're not trying to make up for the fact that you're heavy and leave the wrong impression with these people. You know, I've got people I run things by to help me, like Paul Sherrill, whose class I would be in if I wasn't teaching today. We know that bodily exercise profits a little, but most of the things that we spend so much time, energy, and millions of dollars on are things that go into this body that's going to be buried in the ground. And we do need to be diligent about many things, but we need to realize also that there are some things that go past the physical realm into eternity. And many, many people are dying spiritually and will lose their soul because they got diverted from the dangerous life they're living by their emphasis on their body and the here and now and fun and the flesh. Doesn't it seem a little weird to you that a lot of smokers live so long? We have a brother back in the congregation back home that I've never seen anybody that smokes that much in my life. He's approaching 83. He still smokes about 2 or 3 packs a day. And you just wonder, how can that be? Have you ever heard anybody say when somebody passes away, well, he didn't take care of himself? But the truth of the matter is, we're going to see that a lot of people die fairly close together, whether they were heavy or lean, whether they had good health or bad, unless it's a really critical thing. How many of you are familiar with the Atkins diet? All right. Robert Atkins became famous because he had been told by a friend, Dr. Alfred Pennington, that he would do better if he'd eliminate carbs and sugar out of his diet. And so he did that, he lost some weight, and then he decided to write a book about it. He put out manuals on how to prepare food, and he even sold food and became a very rich man. He fell and sustained a serious head injury, went into a coma, and 9 days later he passed away. They discovered that he had serious plaque buildup in his arteries. He had heart problems. He had a number of things that we would think wouldn't happen if you ate good, but he had those problems just the same. Have you heard of Pritikin? Nathan Pritikin? How many of you have heard of the vegan lifestyle, the vegetable lifestyle? He was the guru of that back in the very beginning. He decided that he wanted to get over the heart attack that he had, so he came up with this diet, and he made really good money with that. He ate only uncooked vegetables and fruits, if that's what he could, with a little bit of carbohydrates. Then he developed leukemia, and he decided life wasn't worth living like that, so he took his life. Think about what this means. If I can't have everything just the way I want it here, I think about Lazarus laying at the gate of the rich man. What did he do wrong? He couldn't even kick off the dogs that came to lick on his sores. And yet he went to heaven, didn't he? And he had some priorities all right in his life. How many of you have heard of Jim Fixx? Jim Fixx was the master of running. He wrote a book called The Complete Book of Running. And one day in 1984, he died suddenly while he was running at the age of 52. When they did the autopsy, they discovered that he had large amounts of plaque built up in his arteries. Isn't that amazing? Someone that eats well and runs every day. But you'll see some people, and I admire their discipline. They have a lot of bragging about how much weight they've lost, and sometimes they strut around a little bit. But you know what? They haven't lost their snide remarks. They hadn't lost their prejudice. They hadn't lost their jumping to conclusions. They hadn't lost their condescending attitude to other people. They hasn't lost their bad attitudes. They hadn't lost the terrible way they treated their wife or their husband. They haven't lost their vulgar remarks. They haven't lost their lewd comments. They haven't lost the dirty websites they got hidden in folders on their computer. They hadn't lost their pride. They hadn't lost their self-obsession. They hadn't lost their hate. They haven't lost their road rage. In some cases, they haven't lost running down the church. Isn't it amazing? You go over there to Galatians chapter 5, and Paul is talking about those things of the flesh that can cause us so many problems. He talks about adultery and fornication and uncleanness. And then he throws in outburst of wrath. And I love this one. Selfish ambition. It's all about me. Recently I was talking with a family, and they hated Sunday services to conclude because they're all going to go to eat and there's going to be a big argument about it, but everybody knows that this one lady is going to decide. So no matter what anybody says, she's going to end up making the choice, and that's where they're going to go, and they're resentful of it. So one day they decided to have a collusion, and they voted against her. So she got sick and couldn't go and went home. Some people will do whatever they have to be in control. Well, these are the kind of things we need to think about as we're talking about fitness, spiritually speaking. I had a few more things to say about this other, but I'm going to skip over that for right now. I did do some research, and I will make it available to you. People who exercise regularly and watch their diet die within a few years of their heavier friends and family members. And to even mention nutrition as a viable lifestyle shows the affluence that we live in our country, because there's some places you eat what you can get, and that's all you have. Of the Indian tribes in North America, now that's fascinating stuff. But there's one tribe really interesting, the Seris. You ever heard of the Seris? They lived in the Sea of Cortez on an island. Some of them lived over on the mainland. And these people, there's just so many things about them that are fascinating. For one thing, they have a European descent. That's different. But they were the most ruthless of all the tribes. And you did not want to get captured by the Seris. They invented fantastic ways of making you miserable and torturing you to death. They also used poison tips on their arrows. And the way they made the poison was they would take the liver out of a deer and put it in a jar. And they put rattlesnakes in there and scorpions in there. And then they shake the jar. And the rattlesnakes and the scorpions would assume this liver was what was causing the problem, so they would sting it and bite it and just continually filling it up with poisons. Then they poured known poisonous plants in there, left it out in the sun, and it's probably just a fable, but they claim that you had to open it very carefully or you could die just from the fumes. This is bad stuff. But you know what? What's inside here? Jesus tells us it's not what comes in from the outside that defiles us. It's what comes from in here. Now, we make excuses sometimes about our physical condition. But what about the excuses we're making about our spiritual condition? We need balance. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 25, Paul said everybody who competes in the games does it for strict training. They do it for a crown that's not going to last. We do it for a crown that will last forever. So he says, I don't run like somebody who's running aimlessly. I don't fight like a boxer beating the air. And then he says, as the old translation most of us are familiar with, I buffet my body daily and bring it into subjection, lest after I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. So we need to be careful, and we need to have balance. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Recently, I spoke on a lectureship in Louisiana, and my topic was addiction. And I was just discouraged, the level of addiction in our country. It's amazing. Everything from medications to tranquilizers to now cell phones. It's an epidemic. Now they're seeing some mental problems in little children because they're being allowed to play on these devices too much. Well, we need to be moderate in all things, Philippians 4 and verse 5. And we need to ask ourselves this question: what lasts the longest, the physical or the eternal? You know, it's hard to get in shape spiritually when you only work out on Sunday. When you need guidance and spiritual counseling, who is it you seek? Is it the sensei at the local dojo? Or is it that person you know who walks with God, who has a track record of stability and faithfulness, that's an island of calm in the maelstrom of life? When I served as the president of the Mental Health Association of Bay County, Florida, most of my life's been spent in North Louisiana except for 6 years when I preached in Panama City. And during that time, I learned so much. It was really amazing. I got to go to the state mental hospital. I got to see the criminally insane. I saw some of the saddest things that I would just get away from the room and take a minute and shed tears that a human being could ever get in that kind of condition. And on all of these courses that I took trying to know what I was doing as the president of this organization, I learned a staggering statistic. About 75% of people who are suffering with illnesses and subsequently hospitalized were there due to their mind. You say, are you saying I just think I have the flu? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that because we stress ourselves and we don't choose the noble things that Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount, we end up releasing hormones and things. I want to read something to you. I'm glad my wife's not here now. She hates it when I read things. This was written for Ladies magazine, so it kind of has a feminine slant to it. It's the link between emotions and health. Our emotional and physical health are inextricably linked. Whether we're happy or sad, our bodies respond physically to the way we think, feel, and act. Anastasia Stevens is the one who wrote this article for Psychology magazine. The argument you've just had with your loved one has left your blood boiling. You phone a friend, and they start making light of it and making fun of you, and before long you're laughing. Our emotions have a capacity to harm and heal, not just psychologically, but physically. Research has shown that having to deliver a speech can double the severity of allergy symptoms for 2 days, while crying is soothing because stress hormones are carried out of your body in tears. So just how do feelings affect our health? When you sing your loved one's praises, expressing the affectionate feelings that you have toward your loved one, it lowers your cholesterol level. A study reported in the journal Human Communication Research showed that when people spent 3 20-minute sessions per week sitting down and writing about why they loved their husband and why they loved their grandson, their cholesterol count fell within 5 weeks. When you're having a blazing argument, according to scientists at Ohio State University, a 30-minute argument with your partner, your husband, whatever, can slow your body's ability to heal by at least a day. If you argue regularly, that healing time is doubled. Researchers tested couples with a suction device that created tiny blisters on their arms. When the couples were asked to talk about an area of disagreement that produced emotion, the wounds took about 40% longer to heal than those in the control group. This response, say the researchers, is caused by a surge in cytokines, the immune molecules that trigger inflammation. High levels of cytokines are linked to arthritis, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. When you're stressed out, research at the Stanford University School of Medicine found that short bouts of stress can boost immunity and raise levels of cancer-fighting molecules, and the effect lasts for weeks after the stressful situation ends. However, long-lasting or chronic stress is a different matter. Stress leaves you in a fight or flight state in which your body turns off long-term building and repair projects, says Robert Sloplowski, professor of biological sciences at Stanford. Memory and accuracy are impaired. Patrols for invaders aren't sent out in your bloodstream. You tire more easily. You become depressed and you get down. Exposure to chronic stress has been found to raise the risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. When you bottle things up, when it comes to venting anger or holding it in, the jury is out as to which works best or worse for us. A long-term study in Michigan looked at women who suppressed their anger in confrontations with their husbands and found that they had twice the risk of dying from conditions such as heart attack, stroke, or cancer. Giving in to the impulse to shout abuse could cause problems too. Angry outbursts may last only a few minutes, but they can cause surges in blood pressure and heart rate, raising the risk of heart attack by 19%, concludes a study at the University College in London. Subtle forms of anger, such as impatience, irritability, and grouchiness, can damage your health. When you're in love, falling in love raises levels of nerve growth factor for about a year. According to the researchers of the University of Pavia in Italy, nerve growth factor, a hormone-like substance, helps restore the nervous system and improves memory by triggering the growth of new brain cells. It's also associated with the feeling of being loved and contented, inducing a calming effect on the body and the mind. And if this goes on, and that's all I'm going to read about at this particular time, but let's get to the book. Ready? Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, quoted and alluded to the Proverbs over and over. It is said that in Matthew chapter 5, in the first 30 verses, he refers or alludes to the Proverbs 7 times. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with the Proverbs, but for young people today, this is what I'm encouraging them to read. Read the Proverbs. Many of them don't understand the Bible. There's no connection to the chronology of it in their mind yet, but they can read in snippets. You know, it's a popular thing now to read a book that's short and you can read it quick. So you read the Proverbs and you can get one line and get a thought out of that. It's a bit scary, and yet it's a bit challenging because it makes you understand a truth, but then the deeper you get into that, the more you think it through. It's a pretty amazing book. So let's look at some Proverbs. In Proverbs 23 and verse 1, when you sit to eat with a ruler, consider carefully what's before you, and put a knife to your throat if you're someone given to an appetite. It's interesting that in the Hebrew, it says, if you are a master of your soul, you exercise discipline. You don't just say, this is just the way I am. You call up something from within to help you face the moment. We need to discipline our lives in matters of our passions and emotions. Refuse to take Satan's bait by becoming angry, frustrated, or bitter. And 50 years in the ministry, I've run into people who have reached a point in their life, they're so bitter, people can't stand to be around them, including their family. And I see people that complain, my kids don't ever come by to see me, and they don't call me either. Well, no wonder. Who wants to hear all that stuff? Can't you find something pleasant to say? Can't you respond to them in a loving way? These are the things that take hold of our thoughts and our emotions and destroy our relationships. You got to train your mind to be stronger than your emotions, or you're going to lose every time. In Galatians 5, verse 22, we read that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. Think about this as I'm reading these. How many people do you know that have these? Long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. Some people can't express love. They won't even say, I love you. They won't even say it to God. And the first commandment is not to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and you love your neighbor as yourself. I have personally dealt with men who had a problem, even in their 40s and 50s, because their John Wayne daddy wouldn't tell them that he loved them. And they needed that approval. They needed to know that this man who sired me loves me. And men, if you hadn't done that yet, please do it. Because it will fill a hole in the soul of your children. We need to tell our wives and our husbands and our children that we love them. And joy. Sometimes, for mischief, when I go to Walmart, I like to walk up and down the aisles and sing. You know, what's the matter with that nut, you know? Isn't it sad that it's gotten like that? Or you whistle a little tune and people, you know, why? You're supposed to be upset. You're supposed to be unhappy. Have you noticed how many people have an attitude going? And here we've got the most fantastic country in the world. We've got every kind of device at our disposal. We've got it made. People are dying to get in this country, and we don't like it. We're not happy with it. Are we happy with anything? Is it possible the smile ever crosses our face? Always scowling? Yeah, but, you know, that's like the old fellow that saw this train, and they told him about it. It was coming to town, so he went down there, and he saw it sitting on the tracks. He looked at the thing. He's kind of smart about mechanical stuff. He said, they'll never get that moving. So they got it fired up, and it slowly, and then it took off. Then you know what he said? They ain't gonna never get that stopped. And that's how some people are. They're going to find something wrong with everything there is. Proverbs 3 verse 11 says, he who keeps instruction is in the way of life, but he who refuses correction goes astray. We've got a world full of people now. Don't tell me anything. I don't need your advice. I can handle this myself. Sometimes we have young people who snap back at their parents who are trying to tell them things to help them. And sometimes parents don't want their sister's advice or whatever. No wonder so many people are so chronically unhappy. Jesus gives the clues in this Sermon on the Mountain. And you know what I appreciate about him? He did it. I guess till the day I die, I will never fully comprehend Philippians 2. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who existing in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal to God, but took upon him the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men. Years ago, I don't know who to credit this with, Bill may know, I heard a speaker say, that would be like us saying, I'm going to become a roach so I can save the roaches. You know, when people tell you can't do something, do you find a little rebellion comes up in your heart? Sir, you can't go down that aisle right now. You know what jumps up in me? Well, you just watch me. You know, that's that spirit. But when we learn to humble ourselves like Jesus did and discipline ourselves, we're going to have a lot less stress in our life. Proverbs 16 verse 9 says, a man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. I think about the King of the universe and that passage that Brother McAdams quoted earlier from Daniel chapter 7. I saw in the night visions, and one like the Son of Man came to the ancient days, and he was brought near before him, and there's given to him kingdom and power and glory and dominion. And you've got all these angels, and we count all this up, they're just uncountable, and it's an exciting scene in heaven. And he leaves that and comes down and stays in a little hovel of a house in Jerusalem. How did he manage to do that? Because he disciplined himself. He said, I got to do this. I don't like it, but I got to do this. So there's got to come up within us responsibility and a feeling of there's some things I've got to do. There's some things I've got to require of myself. Catherine Pulsifer said, one of the best lessons you can learn in life is to master how to stay calm. Some people, I've noticed this so many years, they can't quite make it to the car after church services before they get into it. And doors are slamming, and somebody's mad before they ever get home. There's something kind of disconnect here. When we come and we worship God and we behave ourselves, and then as soon as that's over, we become heathens. That's because we have a need to develop discipline in our lives. Now, pardon me, parents, but this is what it says in almost every translation. Chapter 12, verse 1. Whoever loves instruction loves knowledge, but he who hates correction is stupid. That's what the proverb says. We need to have some self-control through self-restraint. You know, sometimes little cliches can help. Sometimes we wear them out and they become old and worn. But I like that old Kenny Rogers song. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. If you want to keep yourself out of trouble, you remember that. Oh, I'm not going to fall for that. That'll never happen to me. You just triggered Satan's bell, because he's going to show you then that he can get you that way. So we need to know when to hold on and to defend and to hold our ground. And we need to know when to come out of this, and when to walk and when to hoof it. Proverbs 16 verse 32 says, he who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and that he that rules his spirit greater than he that can take a city. So imagine somebody like Saladin or somebody like that on this horse, and he's leading this army, and they've conquered this city and torn the walls down and raided the place. That's pretty impressive. But a person who can control their anger is stronger than that. Yeah, I know. Y'all don't think he's such a great preacher, but he's got a temper. Well, he needs to lose it. Because we can be angry, but we're not supposed to sin with it. And most people take that step, don't they? Proverbs 25 verse 28 is a little bit similar. Whoever has no rule over his own spirit is like a city broken down without walls. So I got all kind of excuses for you as to why I could lose a few. But I see people with all kind of excuses. Well, I just can't help myself. That's just the way I am. I've been this way ever since I was 10 years old. They're bragging about the fact that they need to straighten up and quit making excuses. Get with the program and follow what the Lord said. Did you notice did you hear Brother Keith speaking about finding anybody in the audience who's 90 years old? And Psalm 90 says, all the years of a man's life will be 70, if by reason of strength 80. So in Louisiana, we have an expression called lagniappe. You ever heard of it? It's a French word. It means a little bit extra. I'm living in the lagniappe. But I'm not going to beat the tables. And the insurance companies know that, don't they? My dad lived to be 90 years old. And hooray for him, because that was 90 of the best years I ever spent with anybody. But most of us are going to check out of Hotel Earth somewhere from 70 to 85. Why would you spend the rest of the time you have being mad about everything? Did any of y'all see that thing going around on Facebook about that little toddler trying to put that straw in that cup? Was that classic? She's trying to get that straw down in that cup, and she tries about 2 times, and then she just throws it down. That reminds me of so many people. They just throw fits. They get mad about everything. Do any of you know Dr. Roger Shepard with Amherst University? Okay. He said, your mind is like a muscle. The more you train it, the stronger it becomes. The better you train it, the more experienced and useful it becomes. The more you use it, the richer the spiritual experience. Train it with God's Word daily. Now, if you would turn to Proverbs 4 and verse 23. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it springs the issues of life. Train your mind to see the good in everything. Whatever's lovely, whatever's pure, whatever's of good report. Think on this. I'll tell you what, I'm going back to Louisiana with some good reports. This has built me up. I'm so glad I came. This is the best lectureship I've been to in many, many years. And there's a spirit here that's good. You sense it? I don't see agendas here. I don't see men getting up and being smart oaks. Do you? You ever experienced that? So you know what I'm talking about. If we continue to suffer because we have an emotional reaction to everything that is said and said to us, we're in for a miserable life. True power is to sit back and observe this with a spiritual perspective. True power is restraint. If words control you, that means everybody else can control you. Proverbs 23 and verse 7 says, as he thinks in his heart, so is he. What's in here comes out, doesn't it? It may take a long time to find it. You may have to travel with somebody for months before you finally see what's really in there when it comes out in some inopportune time. Proverbs 27 verse 19 says, as water reflects the face, so a man's heart reveals the man. Hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied. Have you heard this one? I can't help what I think. Now, I may be able to control what I do, but can't help what I think. 2 Corinthians, please. Chapter 5 and verse 10. I'm sorry, I should have said chapter 10 and verse 5. Casting down imaginations. I have a little problem with that sometimes in traffic. The things I imagine about people in the other vehicles. Not always good. So I do a lot of repenting at traffic lights. Y'all do that? Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. But catch this next phrase. Bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So it's my responsibility when Satan plants the seed in there for me to stop it right then and there. Not going there. Not doing that. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to keep control of myself. Colossians 4 verse 6 says, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. I want to call on you to break the generational curse. Quit yelling at your kids before they go to bed and then expect them to sleep well. Quit yelling at your kids in the morning right after they wake up before school and expect them to have a good day. You set the tone for your children. You set the tone for your voice that they will remember the rest of their life. You become their inner voice. Don't be their inner critic. Speak life. Speak love. Speak bravely. Speak kindness and hope, wisdom and truth. Jesus said, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he.